Hey everyone, we're at Donkey Projections. I'm Eric and we have Lucas as always.
Hey everyone.
So what we're going to be looking at today is Cook Political Report's Senate prediction map for 2020.
Yep. These are not our predictions. These are directly from Cook. Cook did it in columns. They didn't have a map, so we made a map ourselves using those predictions. But these are not our predictions, and we'll be explaining what we agree with and what we don't agree with. And with that being said, let's get right into it. So let's start off with what we agree with, which is pretty much most of this. You got the solid red states here, definitely agree with that. Mitch McConnell's likely seat here also makes sense as well. I think, with the Democrats, we agree with Oregon, Illinois, New Hampshire, or kind of New Hampshire. This is Jeanne Shaheen's seat, but I'm pretty sure it will go to Jeanne Shaheen. It's either likely or solid. I think, honestly, at this point, it's pretty much solid. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, we got the East Coast here. No surprises here. Yes, so I think let's now start by going through state by state. I think that makes sense here. So the state of Michigan, I'll start out with Michigan. This is John James versus Gary Peters. John James is a pretty well-known figure now after he ran in 2018. He's considered a rising star in the Republican Party. He nearly won in 2018. But honestly, I think according to the polling, we do see Gary Peters leading by a decent amount to the point where I'm pretty sure it will go to Gary Peters again. Personally, I think lean is a little bit too generous. I would give this one a likely, because I think usually we actually give this one a solid, but I can see the argument for why it's solid. Now the state of Minnesota, we have Smith here. Obviously not as well known as Amy Klobuchar is, but still Minnesota is relatively Democratic. I don't want to say it's fully Democratic because obviously it's considered a swing state still. But Minnesota, I do think will still go to Smith. I would actually give this one solid as well. I don't think likely. It's a little bit too generous to the Republicans here. All right. Eric, how about you talk about the state of Alabama?
All right, so Alabama, this is Doug Jones' seat. And as we've said before, it was very unlikely that he was going to maintain this blue seat. And Cook Political Report puts us as lean Republican, which I completely agree with. Despite the funds that were coming in for Doug Jones, he just didn't have a chance in this state. That was just a fluke, given the situation and what state this is.
That's interesting. I would actually disagree with that. With Alabama, I think this one, there is a pretty high chance that it will not go to Doug Jones. I would give this one a likely. I think this is, again, too generous to the Democrats. It's almost solid at this point. According to polling, we see both Tommy Tuberville and Jeff Sessions leading by quite a few points. Just for some background information, the official candidate here hasn't been declared yet because their runoff didn't happen yet because neither Tommy Tuberville or Jeff Sessions reached over 50% of the vote. Tommy Tuberville is a former football coach endorsed by President Trump. Obviously, that will help him a moderate amount. And Jeff Sessions, of course, is the former U.S. Attorney General that served under Donald Trump but was forced to resign. Either way, whoever wins, there's a pretty good chance that they do defeat Doug Jones. I think the DNC, not the DNC, but the Democrats should stop putting money into the state of Alabama because there is still a pretty good chance that this will go to the Republican, whether it's Jeff Sessions or Jeff Sessions or Tommy Tuberville. So I would give this one a likely. All right.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Let's now head to the state of South Carolina is an interesting one. This is Lindsey Graham's seat. He is relatively unlikable. Honestly, I think likely is an okay characterization, but it's in between likely and solid. We usually put either likely or solid here. Likely is okay, but I think, I'll say that I'm in the middle. It's okay. Yeah.
Right.
Let's see here.
Should we head to the West?
Sure, let's head to the West now. Okay, Eric, why don't you cover Cory Gardner in Colorado?
Yeah, so talking about Colorado here, as you can see, Cook Political did put this as toss-up. I'm actually kind of surprised by this because, a lot of previous pollsters and our own predictions, we think this is very comfortably going to John Hickenlooper. A bit of context, Hickenlooper ran for president for the Democratic Party 2020. He did drop out fairly early, but he did gain some recognition. The Republican Cory Gardner is a very avid Trump supporter, so um, that does change the situation a bit here, and maybe determining why Colorado is leaning more to the left than people think. Maybe I would put it as likely safe, but maybe the one thing that's stopping is that he did had some debacle with the state ethics commission in Colorado. So maybe
Uh-huh.
that's why they were hesitant to put it as
Mm.
such.
I want to actually add an interesting point to that as well. The Colorado primary still hasn't occurred yet. The other main candidate is Ossoff. I think Ossoff, even if Ossoff wins, I still think this state will pretty, not, I don't want to say likely, but it will probably still go to the Democrats. Ossoff. Ossoff is the former Speaker of the House of Colorado, so obviously I think he does have some name recognition here. So I do think even if Ossoff wins, sorry, even if Ossoff wins, I think the state will probably still go to the Democrats because again, Cory Gardner is very unlikable. He is in the top 5, actually. I think top 5 most unpopular senators, top 5 or top 10, somewhere around there. So again,
Yep.
we don't agree with this in Colorado. We think that this will go likely. The state of New Mexico is actually interesting here. This is actually an open seat. Mike Udall said he was not going to run for re-election. But again, New Mexico does have a pretty large Democratic electorate. So I do think that with this state being pretty on the left, not that much on the left, because of course it's not a solid state in the presidential election, but it's pretty much getting there. In my opinion, I still think that this state will probably go to the Democrats, likely, sure, but again, I think the better characterization here is safe. All right, now, Eric, why don't you cover the state of Arizona?
Sure. So again, providing a bit of context here. The Democrat is Mark Kelly, former astronaut, very popular in the Democratic Party. He does also have a brother who's also in politics. Republican Martha McSally has a bit of a controversial history based on just how she got elected into the political
Not
seats.
even elected.
Yeah, exactly. Not even elected. She was just chosen, and people got pretty mad about that. So we would usually think, and other pollsters did lean towards um, Kelly pretty significantly.
Mm,
I'm surprised how, same thing with Colorado, they did put this as toss-up.
uh-huh.
Um, Kelly does not have any ethics committee scandal. I did not read into any history that he has, so I really don't know why they put Arizona as toss-up, other than the fact that it's just a battleground state in general for the presidential election. So maybe
Uh-huh.
they took the same reasoning and made Arizona a toss-up as well.
I would think this one is actually a lean. I think it's a little bit less to the left of Colorado because, of course, Arizona is this new type of swing state than Colorado. Mark Kelly does have a lot of name recognition. I'm not sure if he's really that popular among the Democratic Party, although his wife was Gabby Giffords, who served in the House of Representatives from the state of Arizona, I believe. Um, so that is interesting to take a look at. Martha McSally's appointment is, I think, a pretty bad decision by Governor Doug Ducey here. Um, I'm not sure if people were initially mad about it. I just know that she ran in 2018 and she lost. 2020, she's running again. People remember her. They know that she ran and the voters rejected her. I don't think they're going to be too happy to see that she's running again. I think some of the some of the Republicans might just stay at home. So again, I don't think that this one has a high chance of going to the um, Democrats here. I'm sorry, to the Republicans here. I think this one will go to the Democrats in a lean. Usually, I think it is tilt. I think this is in between tilt and lean, but I would lean more towards lean on this one. Let's see. What else do we need to discuss here? Okay, so let's quickly go through some of the obvious ones here. Kentucky, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, probably going to go to him again. He is very unpopular. The second most unpopular. We'll get to the first unpopular later, but Second most unpopular, but again, this is Kentucky, a solid red state. His opponent's either going to be Charles Booker or Amy McGrath. Either way, I think Mitch McConnell does have a lead in the polls, and he will probably win here. Gosh, this is going to be a long video, but let's discuss, again, quickly here, Texas. This is Cornyn's seat, mildly popular, but unlike Ted Cruz in 2018, he does not have a formidable opponent. In 2018, we had Beto O'Rourke in the state of Texas. Beto O'Rourke visited every single county. He had a ton of funding, but he still could not defeat Ted Cruz. In fact, he came close, but he did not win. So that just kind of shows, although his Texas electorate is swinging more to the left, it has kind of still been a little bit towards the right still, but of course we might see this change. However, I do think that Cornyn will still win this seat because, again, we don't have a well-funded, as well-funded as Beto O'Rourke, and whoever the candidate will be, they will not be, or at least I don't think they'll be visiting every single county in the state of Texas. Another quick one here is Sullivan's seat in Alaska. Alaska is going to the right, to the left a little bit, but this is Alaska, pretty solid red state. Sullivan will probably win again here. All right, Eric, why don't you head now to the state of Kansas?
Sure. So just to provide a bit of context here for the Republican Party, Chris Kobach, who wants to run for this seat, has been caught up in a lot of scandals, and that is going to taint his reputation. So Cook put this as lean, and I only half agree with this, in the sense that if Chris Kobach does get the nomination, then this is lean, and it's not gonna be good for him. No one's really gonna want to pick him because he's been caught up in all of these scandals. But if his Republican primary opponent does get the nomination, and he's actually not that far behind, I think this is somewhere in between a likely and a safe.
I completely agree. Just some more background on Chris Kobach. He ran in 2018 for governor against Laura Kelly. He lost to a Democrat in the state of Kansas. Let me let that sink in. That is pretty bad. If we see Chris Kobach win here again, win the nomination, I think there's a pretty good chance that Barbara Boyer, who is a pretty solid candidate, can take over his seat. Sorry, not take over a seat, but to win this seat here. So I agree with you completely, Eric. Now let's head to the state of Iowa. We have Joni Ernst here, which is she is a pretty relatively unpopular candidate. Her opponent is actually polling quite well. I don't remember. We did a polling video on this. I think he was either leading or very, very close behind her, which is very surprising, especially because we do see Iowa swinging more to the right recently. But I agree with the lean characterization here, especially after looking at the polls with Joni Ernst either kind of trailing behind or leading by just a tiny bit. This really can be in play, and I completely agree with that. Now the state of Maine. Eric, how about you discuss Maine?
Yeah, so let's move on to Maine here. So as you can see, Cook Political put this as toss-up. Let's provide a bit of reasoning for that, probable reasoning. So for the Republican, we have Susan Collins. Susan Collins is the Republican incumbent, and as Lucas said, we were going to reach Susan Collins. Is the most unpopular senator right now. Republicans don't appreciate that. The Democrat, on the other hand, Sarah Gideon, people think she's a lot more favorable because she's not as unpopular, and she does attain most of the Democratic Party here. So usually what we would put for this is definitely not awesome. I think we put this as lean Democratic. So I'm surprised how Cook Political put this as toss-up. Maybe it's because she's just an incumbent, so that's providing her some sort of advantage. But honestly, I think Gideon's going to take the seat.
Yes, I would personally put this as either tilty or leany because we do have to take into account that incumbency advantage. Another reason why Sarah Gideon is considered to be a solid candidate is because she is the either the current or the former Speaker of the House of Maine. Mm-hmm. So she does have a bit of that name recognition here, which makes her solid and experienced. And with that being said, I don't really agree with the toss-up. I would say either tilt or lean.
Mm.
Let's now head to the state of North Carolina. North Carolina, we have Cal Cunningham versus Tom Tillis. Tom Tillis is relatively unpopular. I think he's also in the top 10 most unpopular senators against Cal Cunningham, who is a representative from North Carolina. Polling does actually show Cunningham leading by a few points. And again, that might be because of Tom Tillis' unpopularity. Plus, in North Carolina, there are a lot of African-American voters here. And we also have to remember that this is an election year. So a lot of those Democratic voters might come out and not only be voting for Joe Biden on the ticket, but also the Democrat as well. Because we do also put North Carolina as a toss-up on the presidential level. In the state of North Carolina, I would actually give this one a tilt. However, tilt D. However, this is pretty reasonable here. Let's also head to Montana now. Montana is another state they put as toss-up. Eric, why don't you just talk about this one?
Sure. So let's provide a bit of context. Democratic candidate here is Steve Bullock. Bullock, along with Hickenlooper, ran for the 2020 election, became the most popular governor. So I call these the two Steves here. So the Republican is Steve Daines, and he before running for Senate, he had some high seat here, and he held some sort of seat here, and the people of Montana know him fairly well. So this is a pretty competitive spot here. Although polling did show how it was leaning a bit to the right. I think it was somewhere in between a lean and a tilt. So putting it as toss-up, it's kind of interesting.
I think this is reasonable here, because polling does show, a kind of sometimes Bullock is leading, sometimes Daines is leading. I'm not sure if Bullock is the most popular governor. I think he's up there. I'm not sure if most popular. I need to check on that, but he's definitely up there for one of the most popular governors. I agree with the toss-up rating here. I think let's now head to the state of Georgia, and that should be the last one this episode. Sorry, this is a really long episode. Georgia, we have in Georgia, regular is Purdue here. Purdue, I do think will win this pretty fairly. Polling does show otherwise, but again, it should be pretty solid for the Republicans. Now, in the special election, it gets interesting. We have Kelly Loeffler here. Loeffler. She does have an interesting fight because she did have some scandals. However, in the primary, I do think that Doug Collins will probably win, and he probably will win the seat because Doug Collins does lead the Democratic opponents by a good amount of points. So with that being said, I do think that Doug Collins should be able to win this state. I think it should be likely, actually. But I think lean is completely fine to give. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching this episode. If you like this episode, please hit the like button. And if you like our content, please subscribe. We'll see you in our next episode tomorrow.
See ya.